Today's youth need teachers, volunteers, and most of all, well, they need you. I'm Doug Edwards, and I'm going to be talking with real youth mentors and students to give you the knowledge you need to be the best youth worker possible. This is Youth Worker on Fire. Okay, hey, Youth Worker Nation, this is Doug Edwards with Youth Worker on Fire, and today I have a special friend of mine, Don Holmes. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Don here. Don is with High Point Travel as a travel agent, and High Point Travel's out of Dallas, Texas. He's been a travel agent for a few decades, and he's personally booked over 25 trips for me and my student ministry. To Colorado in particularly, which is one of Don's specialties. He runs the famous groupless ski trip, or for those of you who are modern, ski and snowboard, for youth workers. He's an avid skier. I know because he has beat me in races down the mountain, and that annoys me. He's a family man. He's a former youth pastor and a recent blogger for local sports in his area. Don, does that about sum it up? And can you catch us up?
I actually I don't live in Dallas. I live south of Austin, north of San Antonio, in what they call in Texas the Hill Country. And so that's where I live. And with the great beauty of having computers, I don't have to live in Dallas. The only traffic jam I have in the morning is two Jack Russells going up the stairs.
Jack Russells are a handful. I've got 3 dogs, so I know, and they're not nearly as hyper as Jack Russells. Pretty close, though. And so they'll keep you running.
Yeah, I've never seen an overweight Jack Russell.
No, never. Absolutely not. Well, listen, catch us up a little bit. Tell me about your family and how you ended up doing what you're doing. And
I do a lot of things, actually. But I was a youth minister at Highland Park Methodist in Dallas. Had a meeting with my minister. He said everything's going great a month before, and then the new year hit. He called me in the office and fired me. His reasoning was we're going in a different direction. I love when the ministers say stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
So basically what happened, Doug, is he was feeling guilty, I'm thinking, because he gave me a year's salary or until I found another job. And so I got married in the meantime, and then about a little bit after that, I went to a company called High Point because they had been doing my ski trips when I was at Highland Park. And I was asking them, I said, do you guys ever need help? Well, they're only about 2-3 years old. And the main guy at the company said, I don't think you can make a living doing this. And I said, and so we went over the money, and they said it's about $10 a skier is all you would make. And I'm going, okay, I need to send 2,000 skiers to get $20,000 or something like that. So it was simple math.
Yeah,
exactly. It was simple math. Yeah, and so I said, I'll tell you what, let me work for you for free, because if I tell the church I have a job, then they'll cut out my salary. So I want to work for free and see if I like this job. And if I like it, then I'll stay on it. If I don't, I won't. They said, hey, I can't turn that down. And so I started working in May of that year. And I was still getting paid by the church, of course. And then about, I'm going to say November-ish, December-ish, I talked to my lovely wife and said, I think this is what I want to do. And she said, let's go for it. So I went to the boss in the company. His name's Galen Crane. I went to Galen and I said, I want to work here. And he said, okay. And so that day when I told him that, he came by my little cubicle. Actually, I was in the kitchen because they didn't have a lot of places in their office. So I was working out of the kitchen. But he came by that little spot and he gave me a sheet, an envelope. And I said, what is this? He said, that is all the commissions that you have attained while you've been working for us. And I said, wow, this is more Christian than the ministers I work for. and from that was the root that planted me with High Point, because I found a person that integrity and all those things that you look for in Christian people was prevalent in spades. 30 years later, I'm still working for them. And I was his vice president at one point, not doing that anymore. So about 12, 13 years ago, we decided we wanted to move out of Dallas and come to the hill country. My wife and I are both small-town people, and so we just got out of the big city and living in a little town called Canyon Lake and having a blast here. We've been here about 12 years. I had a lovely wife for 30 years. That would make sense. And then I have two daughters. One's going to the University of Texas, and the other one goes to SCAD. And people in Georgia would know about SCAD. That's Savannah College of Arts and Design. And so that's what she does. And they're both in college. My oldest is a senior at University of Texas, and my youngest is I think she'll be a sophomore or junior this coming season. And so that's what my two daughters do. And so loving life from that standpoint and doing real well.
Don, I tell you what, that is a whole lot. I mean, you pack more into life than many people do in 5 lifetimes, and that is to my benefit because you did so many things for me and hundreds, probably thousands of other youth pastors, people you've sent skiing and snowboarding to Colorado, wouldn't you say?
Yes, I have sent several groups, let's say, to Colorado and other mountains that are mostly in the west. I did one group, Doug, from Florida that went to Switzerland one year.
Oh, and I looked into that one time. You and I never talked about that.
I'll tell you why we never talked about it, because after doing his trip, I decided I'd never do that again, because there's one thing that happens when you send someone overseas like that. Your monetary value changes.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and so the dollar was going down, and everything was costing him more. and so I'm going, man, this is not good, because it's just something that you can't see. And of course, in many cases, your client is giving you the eye, if you will, going, "Why are you doing to me?" When I'm really not having anything to do with the price of money. I could say, "Well, I think it's Clinton's fault," but I didn't want to do that either. Is that the dollar fell, and that's what happened. I think their trip was okay, but I think that's the first and last trip I did. It was the only trip I've done that was overseas. Did it once, and got enough thorns in my foot to know that I better wear shoes next time.
You're very wise, and that's one reason that every trip we took, because it's always a miracle that we were able to go from a small town to Colorado from Florida for 18 years. And I've spent about 20 years doing trips out there because of your groupless ski trip. That was the first trip I went on. So all of those things are just amazing. We would talk through things because I knew you were the man, that you understood a lot of the things that I'd be going through, and you had done so many trips that I could count on you to say, okay, well, I'm going to do things this way. And you go, well, I wouldn't necessarily do it that way. Here's the way I'd do it. And then Dottie Freeman and I, you know Dottie well, would listen to you and go, okay, well, Don knows what he's doing. Let's go this way.
Yeah, the beauty of being a youth minister for 13 years, and I took my groups on ski trips.
Yes.
And I had been to those places that this company was selling. And so when I first started working for them, I already knew the product that I was selling. And I also came to know the Lord. I'll say I rededicated my life on a ski trip. From that moment on, that's what catapulted me into being a youth minister, in fact. And so I also have a spiritual side of liking ski trips and what they can do when you take a youth away from mom and dad, or even mom and dad can be a counselor, you know that, but just taking them out of their own settings and taking them to God's world in the mountains. You have a different type of, I guess, the air spinner, and there's not as much clogged up air, so they can accept the Lord quicker there. And that certainly was my case, where I just rededicated my life on a ski trip. And so I have a little bit of an allegiance to ski trips from that standpoint also.
Well, and we were taking them from sand and sea level to 10,000, 12,000 feet. And so that gives you a whole different perspective. And it was something that no one else in our county was doing. And it was just a dream of mine. And you said it. I mean, you may have been trying to be funny about it, but there's some clarity that happens for students that don't live in those atmospheres, those environments. I would explain to them that this is an extravagant God that we serve, and there's an extravagant God that does not mind us going on these extravagant trips, because we'll do the mission trips, we'll serve at home, but these are trips that are God trips, and we would have many God sightings, and you're right, we'd see students' lives changed. And that's why year after year, our church supported that once they saw everything from college to high school go on those trips and see changed lives and a growing ministry.
That's just so huge, too. When I'm doing a group, let's say out of Texas, that's taking a bus, which people in Florida might not understand.
No, right. We don't want to take a bus.
Yeah, because you ain't going to take a bus to Colorado. I guess you could if you're from the Panhandle, but most groups won't do that.
Right.
But I'll tell groups, I said, don't lose God at Amarillo. And what happens is that the youth in the group, they get on the bus in XYZ town, and they start on their trek to Colorado. Well, they've been in the bus for over 8 or 9 hours by now.
Right. And
they stop in Amarillo for gas to change the bus driver, whatever has to be done. And while they're there, they're only halfway there. And so now they're on the other second half. They're on their way to Colorado. Well, sometimes by the time they get off the bus, by the time they get off their vans, by the time all those things happen, they get in and they start talking to the people there in Colorado. And all the Christendom that they had instilled in them got off the bus in Amarillo. And now we hear this all the time, Doug, where Colorado is not a very Christian state.
Right.
And so when they hear what we do, they say, oh, you bring church groups. Not something you like to hear from people.
No.
Oh, you do ski trips with church groups. That's their attitude on church groups. Because they've heard these people get off the bus and get on their case because the condo wasn't exactly like they liked it, or something happened on the way that caused them just to be a holy terror when they got off the bus.
Yes.
And so they see Christians getting off those buses that they don't want to talk to Christians. And so it's always been my forte to talk to group leaders and say, hey, it's your job when you get off that bus to still be a Christian. You've got to show people what Christ is like. And so you keep him on the bus. You don't let Christ get off the bus in Amarillo. You keep him on the bus all the way, so when you get off that bus, they'll see what Christ is like and know that there's something different about you.
Yes, and that's one thing you have to set your people up for. That's one reason that we flew. And sometimes it was still a 16-hour trip because of flying and then getting your vehicles and getting up there, but there was something relaxing about everybody being able to rest by flying to those areas and then taking an hour to a 3-hour trip. And, we would go out to the far west sometimes, as well as staying there in Frisco and going to the 5 ski slips in that area. But that is one of the things. And we would take at least half of our students would be people who were non-believers. We used it so that both believers, Christian kids, and those who had no idea about church or God could feel like this is something that they could all do. And sometimes you'd find that the kids who had not been churched were nicer because they were more thankful.
Right.
They're not used to somebody doing this for them.
I know of a church in Nebraska that their trip is based on if you sign up, you have to invite someone who's unchurched to go with you.
Yeah, that's a great idea, right?
What that person's doing is that person's raising X amount of money. I forgot how much they raise for that person, but it's not the whole amount. They want that person to pay something. Of course, they're from Nebraska, so the costs aren't going to be as high, and they can go during any time of the weekends. But when they get there, what they're doing, let's say the trip costs $250, they're paying $150 of it. And so I'm going to come up to Doug and say, hey, Doug, I'd love you to go on a ski trip with me. Yeah, really? How much? I said, $100, $50, whatever that cost was that I'd already raised. And then it's my job, and it's our job as a church to get all the Dougs on that trip and show them who Christ is and have a significant impact on after the trip is over that they might dig in and become part of our church.
Yeah, and that's huge. And it doesn't happen every place, but it should happen. And when our church bought into it, not only was there scholarship money for those students that could not afford it, and we took students of all economic levels. It just didn't matter. On this extravagant trip, talking about somebody seeing an extravagant God. These guys who their parents could barely pay the rent and they're living in government housing, and we had everything from that to kids that could pay for 5 people's trips, 10 people's trips, and right. They all saw that. And our church, after several years of it, felt so guilty about my volunteers taking out of their pocket, losing work, that they started raising money. The boards started raising money for my volunteers. Really? Yes. It was absolutely such a God thing.
I've never heard that. That's good.
Yeah. And they should. I mean, some of my volunteers lasted 20, 25 years. The least, most of them lasted because we were very particular. We watched people sometimes for a year to 2 years before we invited them on board. And the longer we watched them, the longer they stayed when we finally asked them. Our church was invested in those volunteers, and that doesn't happen everywhere. But it happens because of longevity, and it happens if you know how to love your volunteers and to treat them like they are gold.
That's a good gold standard, friend.
Yeah. And you witnessed that because we kept doing it. But tell me about your groupless ski trip. Why did you start doing that, and are you still doing that?
We call it the Groupless Leader Ski Trip. And the Groupless Leader Ski Trip was born from me talking when I'm trying to sell you a ski trip. Well, I get to know my customers pretty well. And so there's one guy out of Christ Methodist in Jackson, Mississippi. His name is Dave Marshall. Dave's now in Hendersonville First Baptist Church. And so he's moved even further east. But back in those days, I would ask Dave after the trip. I said, Dave, how was your ski trip? Oh, Don, it was okay. I mean, it was good. I said, well, how many days did you ski? He said, I might have skied a half a day. I said, really? It blew me away. He'd been on a 3 or 4 day ski trip, and he only got to ski about half a day. Well, it then dawned on me, and after talking to him, that he has to go to infirmary. He has to go to, whatever things are cropping up, because he took anywhere between 70 to 100 students every year, okay?
Oh, wow. Yeah, amazing. Awesome.
It wasn't a real small group. And so I found out from guys like Dave is that they are doing a lot of work for little ski. And so I went to Dave and I said, Dave, I want to do something for you. And I said, and that's where it was born out of. I wanted to do a ski trip just for Dave. And so I started gathering. I just went on the phone, started calling all his youth members. Push came to shove, we came to be known as the Groupless Leader Ski Trip. So these are all group leaders without the group.
Absolutely,
and so now they could come, and I was their youth minister, or I was their group leader for that trip. And by the way, if I found anything in their water balloon launchers or anything in their luggage, I would send them home. I didn't put up with any of these youth gals that were, bringing contraband on my trip. So they would go home. To be serious, it became a neat adventure for those leaders. It was a good retreat setting for them. They could get out of the church. I would tell them, I said, listen, you need to come on the trip. And I said, there'll be 2 things that'll happen. They asked me what that was. I said, well, one is that you get to miss staff meeting. You don't have to go to staff meeting on the week that we're doing this. And, man, they perk up on that because we all know staff meetings are not from God, right?
Absolutely.
And so getting out of the staff meeting was wow, this is good. And then secondly, you could go and you didn't have to be a group, and I was going to be a group leader. So those are the 2 things we're trying to involve. And if you went the first time, you certainly didn't take your wife or husband. And so now they said, yes, you can bring your wife or husband. And I would tell them, if I don't see you for 3 days, there was a youth minister that came on the trip. I didn't see him the whole time I was there. And I'm going, after the trip, we're getting on the bus to go back to Denver, and I looked at Micah. I said, Micah, I didn't see you the whole trip. Where were you? And I was kind of pissed. I'm going, man, I put a lot of work in this thing, and he didn't come to anything that I planned or anything. And he said, Don, this was the greatest trip ever. And he had a friend of his that was on the trip. They worked on their whole curriculum for the summer and in the fall. They'd worked it all out. And they were ready to go back to their church, and do what they did best, be a youth minister.
Wow.
And I looked at myself, and I started, if you could kick yourself, you would have seen me trying to do that. Because I'd missed the whole point on why I invited them to come. Because they don't have to go to ski.
No, they don't. And that is a key factor. I wrote a book that's going to be published eventually about rest up. And that is because most youth pastors, after about 5 years, they never get a break. And the longer they stay in, the longer they don't get a break, we find that they don't even know who they are anymore.
Right.
And those breaks, and Mike Iaconelli, who was with Youth Specialty, started that, said when we do our retreats with about 3,000 people, he said, guys, if you don't show up, you and your wife are in your hotel room, he said, we've done our job because you need it.
That's exactly right. Because that's when I got to my idea and going, man, why do I care to even see Micah on this trip?
Right. And when they bring their wives, some of those, that's the best trip and the only great trip of their lives.
Yeah, it talks in spades, doesn't it?
It does. And by the way, Youth Worker Nation, I'm giving you a great gift here. You have just heard about one of the greatest gifts given to youth ministers. This happens once a year, as long as Don does it, and I hope he goes for a whole lot longer. The bottom line is, this is a gift to you, to this groupless leaders ski trip through High Point Travel, but specifically through their agent, Don Holmes. Who does that? And that's why I thought, Don may cost a little less, he may cost a little more to go with them, but I don't care, because God is with this man, because he is taking care of God's servants in so many ways. He's given us back more than we're giving him. And so, Don, I want to thank you personally for that, and I want people to know how to get in touch with you, to use you for these things. And tell us a couple of things here. What time of the year? Do you know when you're going to do it next year?
Well, I try to plan it on when Easter's going to be. First off, the low season, and I love talking to Florida groups and Georgia groups and people down there, because you guys, your spring breaks are so late. And so I'll be talking to a Florida guy, and they'll say, well, where do you want to go? They'll say, oh, we want to go MLK. So why do you want to go MLK? I said, well, when's your spring break? Oh, it's April the 2nd. I said, why don't you go skiing then? They're going, there's still snow. One of my catchphrases is, mountains in Colorado don't close because of lack of snow.
That's
they close lack of interest. So I try to, that's easy to do to get a group to go, and because your prices are going to go down so much, and it's not because there's not going to be any snow there. You're still going to be skiing on a ton of snow. But to get back to the timing, is that I plan it based on Easter. If Easter is like the middle of the month in April, I will do it about 2 weeks before that time period. If it comes in late March, early April, I'll do it a week after that. I try to do it so the group leaders don't have to miss the Holy Week that leads up to Easter, because that's really hard for them to get away anyway, because that's when, you guys are working, 24/7 during that time slot. And so that's when it's usually planned. We have put it on the shelf the last 2 years. It'll get back off the shelf this year. What happened, Doug, is that I let it get away. I started doing it, and I would have anywhere between, we had as many as 100 to 120 youth ministers coming to it. The average that we would have is anywhere between 40 to 70. And what happened was that I was not doing justice to my vendors. And it came to fruition 2 years ago when we were on the ski trips, and the ski rental people who we got free ski rentals from them. We didn't tell these guys this, but the trip only cost you like $7,500, mm-hmm. and the only thing you had to get was your transportation there.
Right.
And so that's what we had worked it down to. Well, that was to cover our costs that we had coming up, and to cover a few of the incidental things we couldn't get out of, like we bought T-shirts for everybody. We do things like that. But what happened is that the first thing that happened was the ski rental people were saying, okay, Don, we want to know how many people here are skiing, and our youth ministers and stuff like that. And so I would give them all the people coming, and they would look at that and say, why is there 14 people from the same church? And so what had happened is that I was allowing some of the group leaders to take advantages of what we were doing.
Yes.
And so they were just inviting anybody if you will. It wasn't that blatant, but it might have been a counselor. It might have been who would have been deserving, but it just kind of got diluted, let's say.
Yes.
And so now my vendor's saying, well, why am I doing ski rentals for people that are never going to bring a group up here to ski? I'm going, you're right.
Yeah, good question.
The mountain got on us. Why are we giving you lift tickets for guys that are never going to bring a group up here to ski? And then I said, you're right. And so I kind of got called on the carpet that year, and I have taken it back. I've gone back to try to revamp it so I can do it so I can be fair to our vendors in Colorado, as well as to make it so it's still something that church guys and gals can come and be a part of. So it's not going to be as inexpensive as it has been in the past, because we just can't get around those hurdles. But that's what's happened. But right now I have it planned. I don't know if I've looked at it, and I forgot when Easter is for next year, but I think it's going to be something like the first week of April, sometime like that would be when it's going to be.
Well, Don, whatever you charge, I know it will be fair. And I know you did it for free and just for transportation for so many years. And so none of us should complain about paying a few extra bucks when it would cost us 10 times that for us to go without you on the trip like
and
that.
I did some research on it by talking to some of the guys who've been coming for all these years, and to ask them, how much would you pay for doing that? And so we will still get things off. It won't cost as much, and still try to make that play as much as we can. We did talk the mountains into saying, hey, if the youth minister wants to bring his wife or husband, we're treating them just like they are the youth minister of that church. And I say youth, we did any type of minister in the church. It didn't have to be a youth minister. I did choir directors, group ski trips, and things like that. So, I know we're talking mostly to the youth nation here, but it's people that are working in church, because anybody that works in a church can burn out.
Absolutely.
Can do that.
Absolutely. And kudos to those guys who are in music ministry and taking their team out, because anytime you take a retreat like that, all it does is bond your people, whether it's a student ministry or another ministry within the church. And also there's Fellowship of Christian Athletes groups and huddle coaches there and different things like that will bring those people as well. And so Don, just appreciate all you've done, all you are doing. Give me some thoughts on travel for anything else that you would like to say to youth pastors, youth workers, even teachers and coaches.
September 11th, 2001, there's an event that happened in the United States called 911.
Yes. And
when those planes went into the Twin Towers, churches changed, and to the good for the most part. They quit taking ski trips every year.
Yes.
They started doing mission trips more.
Mm-hmm.
So High Point was ahead of the curve, because we were doing mission trips already. But when this happened, it caused that part of our business to go even bonkers. And so about 4 or 5 years ago, the mission industry that we do passed the ski industry that we did.
Which is awesome.
And so now we do a ton of mission trips. And it's all based on volume. I mean, our ski business was based on volume. So we go to these places and we can get better deals. In many cases, there's sometimes that we can't. But for the most times that we're working with these people is that we can get better rates on airlines. Give you an example, like American Airlines, we can delay a deposit. You have your group, you're going to go on this trip, but you don't have the funds to put all the money up right now. I can tell you, well, if American is doing it, then we can delay your deposit. So tell me when you can pay, and then I will work with American to see if they can make that work. And so if you just call on your own, you're not going to get those types of deals. And so there's things like that we can do mission-wise for churches. We can get missionary fairs. You can even be a smaller group. A group is usually 10 or more for a mission trip to go overseas or to do domestically or what have you. But we can also get consolidator fairs for groups that would be 7, 8, or 9, 4 or 5. That's not always going to be a money saver. If it's not, I'll let you know. And certainly we'll let you know, because I know if you can do it cheaper, you need to know that. And so you can go in online and find a cheaper flight. But many times we can find deals that will help groups or smaller groups in that area also. And so it doesn't matter the size of what you're doing. I also mentioned that we do a ton with buses. You would probably attest to this. Buses can make or break a youth ministry, or in this case, a youth minister. You call a bus company, and all of a sudden, you got XYZ bus company. When they come up into the parking lot, it's smoking, it's missing a gear. You don't know if it's going to even make it up to where the kids are. And now all the parents and all those kids, all those parents are looking at you going, did Doug get this bus company? What in the, am I putting my kids on this bus type of thing? And so you can get yourself into trouble when you do that. Once again, because I'm a former youth minister for 13 years, there are things that we ask bus companies that we want to make sure that when I sell you a bus, when I give you a quote on a bus, it's already been vetted by us. We've already gone through all the details about what happens to that bus. Give you another example. We will ask the bus companies, do you farm? And that basically means that you can call a bus company and you can get a good rate on them. And this is what happens to those youth guys and gals. You get that contract for that bus from that bus company, and that's why you see a different bus name on the bus come up to your parking lot, is because they farmed it out. What happened is that they only had 4 or 5 buses. And so they already sold those buses, and so now they get another phone call. They're not going to let you off that phone until they make a sale. They sold, and now they're going to find a bus, guess what, that's cheaper than the bus that they had. Why? Because they're going to make their money off of it. So they're not doing it humanitarianly. They're doing it because they're trying to make money from how much you paid them. And so they're going to find a cheaper bus to come up into your parking lot. Well, do you know anything about those drivers? No. You put your kids, your precious cargo in a bus that you don't know anything about? I'll tell you right now, do not get on that bus. I know you might have a retreat that's doing this whatever time, but that is not worth putting your cargo in that bus. Back in my day when I was a youth minister, I probably might not have done that. But being in where I am right now, I do it in a heartbeat. Because that trip to ski, that trip to that camp you're going to, that trip is not as important because of that bus, because your kids are more important than that bus.
Youth workers, I hope you're listening to that, because there have been major accidents that have happened. I know personally. I had a pastor tell me, breaking down in the bus and stuff is half the trip. I said, no. I said, breaking down the bus because I didn't take the right precautions and because it was unavoidable and everybody had done everything they're supposed to do is one thing. But to think that it's okay if we break down and, hey, we kind of hope that happens. No, because you have an agenda, you have things that happen, you have students. And Don, the one thing that I found is with the type of bus companies you have, if something does happen, they are with affiliate bus companies. And we had one company that picked us up within 2 hours after we broke down, as opposed to what I heard a school did just the other day, and it took them 15 hours to get their bus on the road again. And it was a rental bus.
Yeah, I mean, it's off the charts of things that can happen. And I'll be the first to tell you, there's no perfect bus.
Right.
Buses are going to break down. But what you just said is correct. Do they have a backup? And will someone go to bat for you in that case? We go to bat for a lot of groups on ski trips and during the summertime, any type of trip. If something happens to that bus, we will see what the monetary value is on what that group lost out on and go to that bus company to retrieve that monetary value for them. That's another angle that a company like us, or like we are, can do things like that too. So you're not the only one making those phone calls. We knew the bus company. That's why we got a quote from them. But we also can fight for monetary value of what might have happened. So that layover of 15 hours, how many meals did you have to do with the kids? Did you take them to see a movie just to, because you had them for 15 hours? Whatever it is, give us those costs, and then we'll go to the bus company. And we can go to that bus company and say, you do this, or we won't sell your bus anymore to groups.
Yeah,
and we'll take you off our preferred list. That has a lot more value than you just saying, okay, I won't use it again. Okay, well, we lost Joe, but big deal.
Right.
We have volume with our threats with those vendors. which might carry a little bit more weight on what type of retribution you might get from them.
Yeah, that's why I like going with you. There are other companies out there, but I've dealt with a lot of companies, Don, and there's nothing like the personal touch. There's nothing like feeling like somebody's got your back, and that's what I depended on. And there were times I could have gotten a cheaper ticket, but some of my local businessmen here told me a long time ago, they said, you know what, we can outsource things cheaper at other places, but the people we live around, the people, we want their businesses to succeed as well. And there's times that we'll pay a little more to take care of our own than to outsource because we saved a few dollars.
Right.
And that's the way I felt about you and still feel about you.
I appreciate that.
You know, I was really impressed and intrigued by, I don't know, is it a blog post that you're doing for the local sports?
Anything that I do, I have to like it, right?
Yes.
I'm not going to do anything I don't like. And so, of course, I love going skiing, right?
Yes, you do.
I love it. And so I'm selling ski trips to church groups. Right? Who can be bad about that? So I love sports, and also I love youth. I'm a former youth minister. I still love youth. And so I'm also a basketball ref because I like to go into high schools and junior highs and ref youth. That's kind of fun. I help out a camp here that builds houses for people or families that have lost their home by fire or flood. Well, I sell groups into that place. I love helping that camp and helping them do those mission stuff for them. So I got into school here. It was a brand spanking new school, and there's lots of towns around Canyon Lake, but they don't care about this school. Because all you're going to get in the sports pages is a one-liner that says Canyon Lake lost 2-1, Canyon Lake won 2-1. Doesn't matter. You're not going to get much more than that. Every once in a while you will, but time in and time out that won't happen. And so my wife and I started a newspaper in the area. My wife is a journalism from Baylor, so she's good at that stuff. And so I always did her sports for her when she did stuff like that. And so that's what happened. We got down here. She started a newspaper. I started doing her sports, and we were open for about a year and a half. But the price of printing and stuff like that wasn't coming through for us to keep it up. So we quit the business. And I was missing doing that. And I told my wife, I said, "Man, I want to get back and do sports." So we started this website, and I went to the school and I said, "Listen, I want to do your sports again." And they said, sure. So what I've done is that it's ad-based, and so I have about 40 or 50 ad people that come and put their ad on my website, and I go into the sport. I watch the whole thing. I will then go and talk to the coach. I'll talk to the players. I'll get interviews. I have people that take pictures for me, and then I put it up on my website, and it's just like they're reading their newspaper. Now, granted, it has a little bit of my little, I try to make it funny sometimes, if you will.
Yep.
And so I'll put a lot of stuff, because I know the players and parents, I know them all pretty well, so I can be a little bit, it's not going to be as dry as a newspaper write-up. I'll give it to you that way. And so that's what I do, and so I cover all the sports in Canyon Lake High School to the nth degree. And of course, in spring break, or during spring, I can't make all those sports. So coaches are all in. They send me what they can, because many times I can work a story off just a stat line.
Right.
And so they'll send me their stats and stuff like that. I'll ask the coach, "Okay, give me a couple of quotes on the game, and I can make a story out of it." And so that's what I do. And I started that in 2011. So we just finished our fixing on to our 7th year this fall. Doing sports for Canyon Lake High School. But it's the love of the kids. I love interviewing them. The parents can go to my website and get the pages printed up, and so there's scrapbooking material for the moms and dads. They love it because of stuff like that. And, of course, I make enough on it to pay for my gas. I don't have to pay for any of the sporting events. I can go in free. You know, that's kind of fun.
Yes.
It's just fun covering the kids and reaching them in a different way, because I am Christian in my writings. So that's kind of fun.
Yeah, I mean, and once again, you don't have to do that, and it's not really making you a lot of money. But youth workers, there's nothing wrong with you going out and getting ads, selling people ads or things like that. Say, listen, I'm going to take care of this, but I can't spend all my time there unless I'm being taken care of enough so where my family's not hurting. And that's that's a great ministry. I did media forever, probably 32 years worth of media, and still doing that. In fact, that's where the podcast is coming from. And right, and and it was, I met a need. It was a niche area that no one else was filling at the time, and so I was a hero in the area because I would provide for them videos or pictures or whatever. I'd have newspapers calling whatever. This is I think even better because people love to see their name in writing, love to see people write about them. And you're right, in local sports, there's not enough, and that's really prime time to catch an entire society because once their kids leave high school, they're not as directly involved unless they're Tim Tebow's parents.
Old school too.
Old school. That's right. Well, here's what I want to say. Also, now we're going to try to interview Chris sometime. I believe he is the one in charge of your missions booking. Is that right?
It's Chad Crane.
Chad. Okay.
The dad's son, who's now the CEO of the company.
Okay. All right. And we're hoping to interview him in the near future and get that out there as well. And Youth Worker Nation, I did not just do ski trips. We did ski trips. We did mission trips. We did camps. We did lock-ins, which are not of God. And we stopped doing this is my last year because it was killing my volunteer staff. If you want to know why your volunteer staff aren't showing up for 2 weeks after a lock-in, that's why. It was a lock-in. So I stopped doing that. But we did all those things. But I loved what Don did for me in the Colorado area and that sort of thing. So I want to make sure that you were introduced to him and introduced to High Point Travel because I like to back the people who backed me for so many years. So, Don, listen, man, I just want to thank you from Youth Worker Nation, Youth Worker on Fire, all the things that you've done for me and your family, your wife has done to keep you going and to help us all out. And I pray that many, many, many hundreds of other youth workers and youth pastors will use your services and get to know the Don Holmes that I know. I
appreciate that. Let me ask you something real quick. I know there's a Youth Worker Nation out there, but the youth workers are fixing to go into 3 months. What Christ had to descend for, he could ascend. And so this is their descending time.
Exactly.
So they can ascend in August when it's all over. Can we pray on your blog so we can, for these guys and gals?
Absolutely. Pray for us, Don.
Lord, we just ask that you be with these youth ministers and that you, they're on the front lines, Lord. And we ask that you be with them, that you protect them, that you give them strength that passes all understanding, Lord, that they might see it all the way through, Lord. Keep them away from Satan and how he can instill in them things that they don't need to be instilled with, that they can keep clean during this time slot where they don't grow weary, Lord, and keep them strong and courageous. And ask that you put your hedge around them to protect them in their travels, and in everything that they do, Lord, because everything has one purpose, and that's to bring the kids closer to you. And so we ask that comes to fruition through these summer months, and that you instill in them the power that they can make that work. In your name we ask it, amen.
Amen. And Youth Worker Nation, amen to you, and we thank God for you. Make sure that you subscribe to us to keep us on the air. Also, you can get us on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, and we are also on YouTube. So make sure you go there and subscribe to those things. Youth Worker Nation, we are out. See you, Don.